My name is Dr. Elena Frost, and I need to tell you this while I still can, while the memory is sharp enough to cut through the fear that has rooted itself in my chest like ice crystals forming in lung tissue. I was the senior seismologist at Station Polaris, a research outpost built on the Lomonosov Ridge, 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle, where the ice is 3 meters thick and the ocean beneath drops to depths that swallow light itself. We were there to monitor tectonic activity, to record the Earth's pulse in one of its most remote arteries. But what we recorded in those final weeks was not the shifting of continental plates or the groaning of glacial movement. What we recorded was something waking up. It started on March 14th at 0300 hours. I remember because I was alone in the seismograph room, watching the needles trace their endless rhythms across the drums, those delicate lines that spoke of a planet in constant motion. The others were asleep in their quarters, and the station was filled with that particular silence that only exists in places where humans do not belong. A silence so complete it has weight and texture. Then the needles jumped. Not the gradual build of a distant earthquake, not the sharp spike of nearby ice fracture, but a rhythmic pulse, slow and deliberate, 0.7 hertz, almost impossibly low. I watched those needles draw their pattern for 47 seconds before it stopped. And in that moment, sitting in that room with the Arctic night pressing against the reinforced windows, I felt something I had never experienced in 15 years of fieldwork. The certainty that I was not observing geology, but biology. I documented everything. I had to. That is what scientists do when confronted with the impossible. We measure it, we record it, we wrap it in data until it becomes manageable. The pulse repeated at irregular intervals over the next 72 hours. 0.7 hertz, always the same frequency. I ran every analysis protocol we had. It was not machinery, not Russian submarines testing beneath the ice, not resonance from the station's own systems. The source was deep, approximately 8 kilometers below the ocean floor, in a region where our surveys had previously indicated nothing but solid bedrock and ancient sedimentary layers. But something was there now, or perhaps it had always been there, and we had simply lacked the sensitivity to hear it breathing. Dr. Yuri Volkov, our geophysicist, thought I was experiencing equipment malfunction until he saw the data himself. I will never forget the way his face changed, the color draining from his cheeks as he traced the waveforms with a trembling finger. He said something in Russian, a prayer or a curse, I could not tell which. He pulled up historical seismic records from the region going back decades, and we found them. Anomalies, brief disturbances dismissed as instrument error, or ice quakes scattered across 70 years of data like breadcrumbs leading to a truth no one wanted to follow. Each disturbance measured 0.7 hertz. Each lasted between 40 and 50 seconds, and they were increasing in frequency, century by century, decade by decade, year by year, as if something vast was slowly returning to consciousness after sleep measured in geological time. On March 19th, the pulses changed. They began to synchronize with tidal patterns, responding to the gravitational pull of the moon, as if whatever lay beneath was testing its connection to the surface world. We started picking up secondary signals, higher frequencies that rode atop the primary pulse like harmonics, complex and layered. Yuri suggested we were detecting resonance through different geological strata, but I knew better. I had spent years listening to the Earth's voice, and this was not resonance, this was communication. The harmonics varied, shifted, repeated in patterns that suggested intention. We recorded everything on the station's backup drives, encrypted the data, and prepared a report for the International Seismological Commission, but we never sent it. Because on the night of March 20th, the ice began to sing. It was Chief Engineer Mikhail Petrov who heard it first, standing outside during a routine equipment check. He came back inside with frost in his beard and terror in his eyes, telling us about sounds coming from below, deep vibrations that made his teeth ache and his vision blur. We thought he was experiencing the effects of prolonged isolation, Arctic psychosis, but then we all heard it. A low-frequency hum that penetrated the station's foundation, that made the coffee in our mugs ripple in concentric circles, that set our instruments screaming with input they were never designed to process. The seismographs went wild, needles slamming against their stops, drums tearing under the violence of the vibrations. And beneath it all, that 0.7 hertz pulse, now strong enough to feel in our bones, in our skulls, like a heartbeat that belonged to the world itself. I want you to understand something. I want you to think about what you would do if you were in my position, staring at data that suggested the impossible, feeling vibrations that science said should not exist at those frequencies, watching your colleagues' faces reflect the same creeping dread that was colonizing your own mind. Would you report it? Would you flee? Would you convince yourself it was all a mistake, a confluence of natural phenomena misinterpreted by exhausted researchers? Or would you do what we did, which was continue recording, continue documenting, because that is the only weapon we have against the dark, the only way to impose order on chaos? I think about this often now, in the nights when sleep will not come. I think about whether we should have run while we still could. If you have ever encountered something that science cannot explain, something that lives in the spaces between what we know and what we fear, leave a comment below. Tell me I am not alone in this. Tell me others have heard the pulse. On March 22nd, the ice cracked. Not surface fractures, not the normal thermal expansion and contraction that Arctic ice experiences, but a crack that originated from below, from the ocean itself, a fissure that spread across 3 square kilometers in less than an hour. We watched it on the station's external cameras, a dark line opening in the white expanse like a wound, and from that wound came water, black water that should have frozen immediately in the negative 40-degree air but remained liquid, steaming as if heated from below. The seismographs showed the pulse had intensified, now occurring every 11 minutes, and the harmonics had become so complex that our analysis software crashed trying to process them. Yuri stopped speaking Russian. He stopped speaking altogether. He just sat in front of the monitors, watching the waveforms, and when I asked him what he was thinking, he turned to me with empty eyes and said, "The old maps were right. There are places on this Earth that were never meant for us." The acoustic sensors we had deployed beneath the ice, meant to monitor marine mammal activity and ice dynamics, began picking up sounds that were not in any database. Clicks and groans, and something like singing, if singing could be performed by something with a throat the size of a cathedral. The sounds came from the direction of the crack, from the impossibly warm water that continued to steam and spread despite the Arctic cold. We triangulated the source using multiple sensor arrays, 8.3 kilometers deep, directly beneath the warmest part of the upwelling, and rising. Whatever was down there was ascending at approximately 20 meters per hour, a pace that suggested deliberation rather than buoyancy, as if it was choosing to approach the surface, as if it had decided the time had come. By March 24th, the station was experiencing continuous vibration. Equipment failures became routine. The power systems fluctuated. The ice beneath us groaned and shifted in ways that made the structural engineers nervous. We should have evacuated. We should have called for extraction the moment the crack appeared, but communications were unreliable, and there was a part of me, I will confess this now, that needed to see what would happen next. I needed to witness what was coming. It is the curse of scientists, this need to observe, to understand, even when understanding might cost everything. We were 7 people on an ice station in the Arctic night, and something ancient was waking up below us. and I could not look away from the seismograph needles drawing their prophecy in ink and paper. On the morning of March 25th, the pulse stopped. Complete silence. The seismographs showed nothing. The acoustic sensors detected only the normal sounds of ice and current. For 6 hours, we experienced relief so profound it felt like oxygen returning to a suffocated room. We began preparations for emergency evacuation, contacted the logistics coordinator in Longyearbyen, arranged for a helicopter extraction within 48 hours. We thought it was over. We thought whatever had been stirring in the deep had returned to sleep. We were wrong. At 1800 hours, every seismograph at Station Polaris registered a single pulse. Not 0.7 hertz, not the slow biological rhythm we had been tracking. This was something else. A pressure wave that originated from directly beneath us and propagated outward in all directions, at a speed that suggested it was not traveling through rock, but through something else. Something we had no models for, no equations to describe. The wave hit the station like a physical blow. Windows cracked, lights shattered. I was thrown against a wall hard enough to break 2 ribs. When I pulled myself up and looked at the seismograph drums, I saw what the needles had drawn in that instant before the paper tore, and I understood why the old cartographers wrote warnings on their maps, why they drew serpents in the empty spaces of the ocean, why some knowledge is too dangerous to preserve. The crack in the ice had become a hole. A circular opening 300 meters in diameter, perfectly round, edges smooth, as if cut by something with intention. The water inside was black and still, and it did not freeze despite the temperature. And as we watched through the station's cameras with our emergency lighting casting everything in red, something broke the surface. Not all of it, just a part. An appendage or a spine or a structure that might have been any of those things or none of them, rising from the water like a tower of flesh and chitin, and something that gleamed with bioluminescence, the color of deep sea vents, the color of places where chemistry becomes something other than chemistry. It stayed on the surface for 17 seconds. We recorded it. The footage is on the encrypted drives that I managed to save before we evacuated, before the station's foundation gave way and the entire structure collapsed into the ice. In those 17 seconds, I saw what had been sleeping 8 kilometers down, what had been pulsing at 0.7 hertz, what had been waking up over the course of weeks or months, or perhaps centuries. I cannot describe it completely, because human language was not built to contain such descriptions, but I will tell you this. It was vast, it was aware, and it was looking at us with something that might have been curiosity or hunger or recognition. We evacuated on foot, 7 people dragging emergency sleds across the ice toward the nearest research station 60 kilometers south, while behind us the hole in the ice continued to grow and the thing we had recorded continued to rise. The rescue helicopter found us after 18 hours, suffering from exposure and frostbite and something else, something that does not have a medical name, the trauma of witnessing a truth that unmakes the world as you understood it. They brought us to Longyearbyen, then Oslo, then separate locations as various agencies became involved, asking questions, confiscating equipment, ensuring our silence through methods both official and unofficial. But I kept the data. I encrypted it, I hid it, I preserved it because that is what scientists do. We document, we record, we leave evidence for those who come after. And I am telling you now because the pulse has started again, not beneath the Arctic ice, but in other places. The mid-Atlantic Ridge, the Mariana Trench, the Kerguelen Plateau, 0.7 hertz, increasing in frequency. And I need you to understand what this means. I need you to share this, to spread this information, to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Not for vanity or profit, but because these records need to survive, because someone needs to keep watching, keep listening, keep documenting what is waking up in the deep places of the world. Subscribe to stay warned about what really lives beneath the surface, because the warnings are all we have left now, and because what happened at Station Polaris is not an isolated incident, but a harbinger. The data does not lie. The seismographs do not make mistakes. Something immense and ancient sleeps in the abyssal depths, and it is waking up station by station, fault line by fault line, responding to signals we cannot interpret and emerging according to schedules we do not understand. I recorded it waking up. I have the proof. And I am telling you now, while there is still time to prepare, to listen, to watch for the signs, because the Earth is older than we imagine and stranger than we allow ourselves to believe. And what sleeps in its deepest places does not sleep forever. They told me to forget what I saw. They told me the station collapsed due to ice instability, that the seismic data was corrupted, that 7 researchers experienced mass hysteria induced by isolation and darkness. But every night I feel that 0.7 hertz pulse in my bones, in my teeth, in the base of my skull, where the primitive brain still remembers what it means to be prey. And I know it felt us too, observing from above, recording its awakening, bearing witness to its return. I know it knows we are here, and I think, in the moments before sleep finally claims me, that it is pleased we are watching, that it wants us to see what is coming, that our attention is not unwelcome but invited, even necessary, for what happens next. The last thing I will tell you is this. On the helicopter leaving the ice, as we gained altitude and I looked back at the hole in the Arctic where Station Polaris had been, I saw something moving beneath the water, just beneath the surface, something vast enough to displace the ocean itself. And in that moment I realized the truth that will haunt me until the day I die. We did not record it waking up. We recorded it noticing us for the first time. And now it knows we are here, and it is rising. And there is nowhere on this blue planet where the ocean does not reach, where the pressure of the deep does not exert its influence, where the pulse cannot be felt by those who know how to listen. The seismographs are still recording. The data continues to accumulate. And beneath Arctic ice, beneath tropical waters, beneath every ocean on Earth, the pulse continues, 0.7 hertz. The heartbeat of something that was here long before we arrived and will be here long after we are gone. I recorded it waking up, and that recording is all the proof I have that what happened was real, that the warnings in the old maps were not superstition, but memory, that the deep is not empty, but full, terribly and wonderfully full, and what sleeps there has begun to wake.